Okay, awesome. Here we go. Welcome everyone to our webinar on mapping out Australian crypto token laws. My name is Robert Chen and I'm a senior lawyer in LegalVision's FinTech team, and I'm joined today by my colleague Joel George, also a senior lawyer in our FinTech team. So before we begin, a couple of quick housekeeping items. You'll be emailed the webinar recording and slides. Don't worry about frantically taking notes throughout. Throughout the webinar, feel free to submit your questions in the chat box and we'll do our best to get through all of them at the end of the webinar. And please complete the survey after the webinar. So, as an attendee of this webinar, you are also eligible to receive a free consultation with us to discuss how we can help you with any of your legal needs. And to request your free consultation, pretty easy, provide us with your contact details in the survey that appears at the end of the webinar. So today, we'll be discussing the Australian Government Treasury's Token Mapping Consultation Paper, released in February. That paper then touches and introduces key concepts, which we will go through as well as a token mapping framework. Then we'll touch on some legal regulatory issues, which the paper identifies, and we take our spin on it. We provide a spin on it. We'll also go through some likely developments before we conclude with the Q&A. Now I'll hand over to Joel to talk about the token mapping consultation paper.
Thanks so much, Robert. Welcome everyone. So the consultation paper was basically a government issued paper that sought feedback from all stakeholders within the crypto ecosystem, including us legal practitioners. The consultation period was from the 3rd of February until the 3rd of March. We here at LegalVision, Robert and myself, we've made our submission to the Australian government, addressing the questions that was asked in the paper. Broadly speaking, though, the consultation paper explored key concepts within the crypto ecosystem, but we do want to drive home the point that although the concepts were mentioned by the paper, there's very much no consensus yet on those concepts. So it's very much a work in progress. The other things that the paper did was provide an overview of token mapping. I'll talk a bit more about this soon. It also challenged the existing financial services framework and posed certain elements and certain questions of the crypto ecosystem. The paper alluded to potential approaches that policy and legislation may likely take based on certain processes. It also illustrated what we can probably expect from the Australian government for the crypto ecosystem in this year, 2023. Now, as promised, the token mapping overview. What is it? Token mapping is very much a two-step process. Step one is where we look at key activities and products in the crypto ecosystem. And step two is where we map those key activities and key products against existing regulatory frameworks. Now, the main regulatory framework that a lot of us legal practitioners talk about when talking about the crypto ecosystem is none other than Chapter 7 of the Corporations Act. Now, throughout the paper, there was very much two very obvious core concepts that the government has been using in its existing framework, but also that it's alluding that it's likely to keep using in any future regulation. And that's the functional approach, which is defined as basically a focus on a function of an overall system rather than the characteristics of that system. And the second core concept of philosophy is technological neutrality. And that's basically a focus on outcomes of a product or system rather than the technological processes that led to that outcome. Though you would see throughout this webinar, a lot of things that are discussed will very much keep in line with these two core concepts and philosophies. And so having said that, I'll pass the baton back to Robert to talk about some key concepts.
Thanks, Joel. And as Joel mentioned, there is no consensus as of yet on the meaning of these key concepts which the paper introduces in the industry. But in our view, it is important. I mean, that's why we're doing this webinar and providing you with this, because we think that these key concepts which have been proposed will likely be used in the discourse for regulation, and therefore will be used throughout industry. And then subsequently, if there are any legal documentation that organisations have, you'll find that the terminology or the key concepts will crop up in those documents. One thing to note, though, is obviously these concepts may change depending on the outcome of the consultation process. Now, if we take a bird's eye view of these key concepts, we start with the crypto network, which is described as a distributed computer system capable of hosting crypto tokens. So these are platforms where you can record or store crypto tokens and smart contracts. And they primarily have two functions, which is to store information and process user instructions. So as you can see, this is a broad, simple, and technology neutral description. And examples of a crypto network are, say, the Bitcoin and Ethereum networks, blockchain networks, which are also examples of what the paper describes as public crypto networks, as distinct to a private crypto network. An example of that would be, say, IBM's blockchain, which is used in supply chain management, for example. Honing in on the next key concept we've got there, which is the crypto token. And that's a unit described as a unit of digital information that can be exclusively used or controlled by a person. And that's despite that person having not controlling the host hardware where that token is recorded. Examples of crypto tokens, and there's plenty of them out there, include, say, NFTs. One of the types of crypto tokens you'll see out there is a smart contract token. This is described in the paper as a crypto token that has been created using a smart contract. The vast majority of smart contract tokens out there will be, the vast majority of crypto tokens are smart contract tokens. And examples include, stable coins, NFTs, governance tokens, and meme tokens as well. Now we move adjacently to the third key concept, which is the smart contract. This one is probably not going to be disputed, as it's already universally probably well understood, and it's a piece of computer code that has been published to a crypto networks database. And a smart contract is guaranteed to run in a predefined and deterministic manner without intervention. But we'll put a pin in that one, come back to that one. So from the key concept of a smart contract, we can then zoom in on three sub-key concepts that the paper touches on: a smart contract protocol, a smart contract application, and the smart contract token, as I've just talked about. A smart contract protocol is a collection of smart contracts that can perform more complex and flexible functions than a single smart contract. It's quite prevalent in DeFi or decentralized finance. So an example of a smart contract protocol is Uniswap. And that's a decentralized exchange protocol which uses a collection of smart contracts to perform functions such as trading or executing trades, lending, staking, and that's without the need for a intermediary. Smart contracts and smart contract protocols, as you can see, are therefore the building blocks for smart contract applications. A smart contract application combines this new technology, smart contract protocols, with conventional Web2 technology to create a user-facing application. So that's typically via a web browser or a mobile application. So if we use the Uniswap example, it's the Uniswap website, because it's the link. That's the link between the user and the smart contract protocol. So I'll hand it back to Joel now to take us through the token mapping framework concept.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, the paper very much explored the token mapping framework, which, as we mentioned, was a mapping of the crypto ecosystem and its key concepts against the existing regulatory frameworks. Now, the paper basically relied on three fundamental concepts, potentially four, if we look at the diagram on the slide, which is the first being crypto token, which the paper defined as a physical or digital unit of information that has a role in a token system, in a given token system. A token system, on the other hand, was defined as a collection of steps or arrangements involved in performing or achieving a particular function. And then the third concept is function, which the paper defined as any benefit ensured or facilitated by that token system to a token holder. Now, interestingly as well, the paper defined the concept of a crypto asset, which is basically a token system that is intrinsically linked to a specific crypto token. And we noted it was particularly interesting because crypto asset did not link to the crypto token, but rather to the system. Now, an example that the paper gave was the Matic crypto asset and crypto token, which is the crypto token itself was the Matic token. The token system, on the other hand, was the Polygon network's fee market mechanism. And in return, the holders of the Matic tokens would have access to the function which is used within the Polygon network. So that's very much how the paper took the approach. Now, under existing laws, bearing in mind the existing regulatory framework that we are contending with, a financial product is very much largely determined by the function of a product. The Corporations Act defines a financial product as any facility that allows a person to make, number one, a financial investment, number two, manage a financial risk, or number three, make non-cash payments. There's another section within Chapter 7 that basically deems certain things automatically as a financial product. And those things are, securities such as shares and options, debentures, derivatives, insurances, super, and all the other things that are listed on the slide. Those are automatically deemed as financial products. So, given all of that, the question that the paper proposes that we always ask as to whether or not a crypto asset is a financial product is very much not a question of whether the crypto token is a financial product. The question really should be, at least the paper says it should be, whether the token system is a financial product. And that in turn requires a two-part question. The first question we have to ask is the token system in question, is that token system a facility? And the second question is, if the answer is yes, is that facility one through which a person can do any of the general financial functions? The paper then suggests that if the answer to both questions is yes, then the conclusion is yes, that crypto asset is a financial product. Now, this is very much the position that has been proposed by the consultation paper. Is by no means an exhaustive answer to all our questions as to whether something is a financial product. But that's very much a key thing. This framework is key in understanding certain other issues that we're about to explore. Brings us to the very first issue that we're about to explore, which is the complexity of analyzing function itself. We have a situation currently where there's a clear need for clear guidelines, at least for the crypto ecosystem and how that relates to existing frameworks. But having said all that, is it really possible for crypto assets, given that crypto assets have unlimited functions? The paper itself acknowledged that it's basically limited to only the human imagination. And unlimited functionality makes it very hard for existing laws to go beyond a functional analysis. It would be very hard to exhaustively list out what is and is not a financial product. But having said that, if we did use a functional analysis without clear guidelines or without an exhaustive list, we face other problems. For example, how far are we meant to look into ancillary or derivative functions? This then begs the real question, right? Can crypto ecosystem, can it really fit within the existing framework? And hence the dotted line in the middle of the slide. And our suspicion, though, is that the government will make it fit, which then brings us to some examples to see how complex the questions can be. So let's take an example where you have a company that mints and sells NFT A. NFT A in exchange, in return, can be freely traded for NFT B. NFT B is then backed by ETFs or exchange traded funds, which is a financial product. Because of that, NFT B is clear-cut, it's a financial product. Now the question then becomes, is NFT A a financial product because it can be traded for NFT B, which is a financial product? And then, to further add complexities, does it matter if the trading between NFT A and NFT B was not the primary purpose of NFT A? What if trading between NFT A and NFT B was enabled by a different platform or a different provider altogether? These are all the questions that make analyzing function quite complex. To give another more recent example, in fact, is 2 weeks ago, we had the New York State Attorney General filing a lawsuit against KuCoin. Some of you may have read about this. Now, quite interestingly, the Attorney General argued that within the lawsuit, amongst other things, ETH, so one of the big ones, ETH is a security. Now, the laws are similar, though not the same, with the Australian laws. But the argument that the Attorney General said was that Ethereum is a proof of stake crypto network where investors can stake their ETH in exchange for rewards. And the argument was that this was quite analogous to the interest that's generated by bonds. Now, bonds in Australia is a financial product. So then the question we ask ourselves as legal practitioners, and I'm sure everyone in the crypto ecosystem is asking, is staking even a function, or is it merely a characteristic of ETH? Or does it even matter that not all ETH holders will be staking their ETH? Or is this going to be a blanket rule? And the question then also, further questions. What about intermediate transactions where, for example, if we tied this example to the previous example, what if NFT A would have been traded for ETH first, and then ETH on a particular platform would then be used to purchase NFT B? Where do we draw the line as to what is the function and what is the system? So you can see how all the regulatory issues are starting to build up. But yeah, so I'll hand over the reins back to Robert, who's going to talk on intermediate systems and other things that we've identified as potential issues.
Thanks, Joel. And we'll press on, go deeper into this paper, into some more legal regulatory issues. So one thing that the paper does is, obviously, it's proposed a high-level taxonomy of 4 product types, which are grouped into 2 kinds of token systems. We've got intermediated token systems, where there's two product types there, so crypto asset services and intermediated crypto assets. And then the other system is the public token system, where the product types within that are network tokens and public smart contracts. And on this point, we do agree with Treasury that there is not going to be an exhaustive taxonomy. And that's just because, like Joel alluded to earlier, there's an infinite possibility. There's infinite possibilities in terms of when you combine the functions of crypto assets, network tokens, and public smart contracts together. Now, turning to the next slide, I want to touch on the 2 token systems. So that's the intermediated and public token systems, before delving a bit deeper into the 4 product types. So the intermediated token system, now that we have this, the key concepts defined and in mind, the systems which involve a promise or arrangement for functions to be performed by intermediaries or agents. And these functions are typically the real-world functions that humans perform, so the human touch, so to speak. These intermediated token systems are the links between crypto networks and the real world. So, for example, on-ramping and off-ramping services, or the creation and issuing of stablecoins. And as such, obviously, this is where a lot of the risk resides. So whether that is for consumers, investors, enterprises, lenders, financial institutions, it's because of this link and maybe because of human nature. This is where things are prone to going wrong and causing significant loss and harm. So from here, we look at one of the 4 product types, the crypto asset service, which is a type of intermediated token system. The crypto asset service accepts crypto tokens as part of performing a function under a legal agreement or other arrangement. So examples of a crypto asset service include lending, borrowing, like I mentioned, on-ramp, fiat on and off-ramping, mining, staking as a service, and custodial services. Crypto asset services is probably the most common way which consumers get exposed to crypto. And we only need to look at 2022 to see why this is an area which does need to be regulated. So look at FTX, Three Arrows Capital, Voyager. So I guess as legal practitioners, it's quite evident that crypto asset services need to be assessed against the existing financial services regulatory framework. The question being, is there a financial service that's being provided here? And a financial service is a key concept which is set out in the Corporations Act, and it's set out with reference to specific activities and some of which are to be, I guess, determined based on a functional approach as well. So, of course, this needs a thorough legal assessment, and the consequences, depending on the outcome of that legal assessment, can mean that a crypto asset service provider may need to become a licensed financial service provider. So, the paper does provide some certainty, and that businesses which are licensed to offer crypto token derivatives, such as options, futures, and contracts for differences, or the operators of ETFs, which provide investors with exposure to crypto, are prime examples of crypto asset services and therefore need to be licensed. Now we move to the next product, that's the intermediated crypto asset. This is a crypto asset where the link between the crypto token and the token system is created by a legal agreement or other arrangement. And this linking is described in the industry as the tokenization or the programmability of an asset. So these assets often are, say, a bundle of rights, or can also be tangible things as well. So when you think about the crypto token that I guess we're dealing with, it's really just the digital record of a real world asset. So examples of these intermediated crypto assets may include, say, the right to licenses in relation to event access or subscription. So we look at the Australian Open last year, for example, intellectual property. We'll see many NFTs represent ownership of intellectual property. Reward programs, look at Starbucks, real property. There's the example over in the States where NFTs can be used to purchase property, or can also represent legal documents. So NFTs over in the States can be used to effect legal service of proceedings on a person. Now, there are 2 types of intermediated crypto assets, as you've probably gathered through those explanations. There's what the paper calls a wrapped real-world asset. So these are stable coins, which are backed by fiat currency or maybe another commodity. NFTs, which can be backed by intellectual property. And then the other category is what the paper describes as an other real-world asset. So where there's no underlying asset which backs the crypto token. So this might be, say, an in-game token, for example, which gives the holder of the token rights or properties in the game, or a holder exclusive access to an event. So from here, once the token mapping consultation process has played out, we'll get a better idea of where these intermediated token systems could fit. So whether they fit within the existing financial regulatory framework or outside of it. So on one hand, we could see Parliament say that, yes, the existing functional based approach works. And we can see to an extent that it works for some intermediated token systems, definitely. And therefore, we keep applying the existing functional based approach. And we could also see, say some further regulation being drafted or even ASIC regulatory guidance being provided around the fringe intermediated token systems, or the ones which sit outside of the existing financial regulatory framework. So the ones which don't have a financial element to them, for example. So I think one example of where intermediated token systems, especially these crypto assets, and in particular the crypto asset services, will likely be regulated. Is one key example is say custody or custodial services. They're often a part of these intermediated token systems. So take a centralized exchange where like FTX or BTC markets, where crypto tokens are held on behalf of consumers. We could potentially see custody and licensing requirements come to play here, like they have in overseas jurisdictions, like in Hong Kong and Singapore, because at the moment, these centralized exchanges, known or referred to as digital currency exchanges, have to register with AUSTRAC for AML CTF reasons, but not for custodial, but not for the for licensing or custodial obligations. So, and these obligations are typically reserved, for ADIs, banking and financial institutions. So, we could potentially see some legislative changes which may mimic the banking standards which banks are held accountable to. So, it may be that capital adequacy requirements may be put in place. Now, moving to the next slide. So, I guess flowing from that, even though we don't have bespoke crypto legislation at the moment, I think it's always good to remind people that other existing laws and regulatory frameworks still apply. So Australian consumer law continues to apply. So the misleading or deceptive conduct prohibitions within that. Obviously, contract law still applies. Financial services law still applies, as well as AML CTF laws, and everything else continues to apply. It's not an completely unregulated area. There's also what we've identified as a disconnect, where businesses operating these intermediated token systems need to provide clarity and education to consumers, because these intermediated crypto tokens that people are buying may be subject to existing laws. And that's when we look at the other end of the equation there, when we look at the real world asset which has been wrapped by the crypto token. So the example is, if you buy an NFT which represents title over real property, say a house, living the Australian dream, well, current Australian law won't recognise it as good title until that title is registered. So there are real life implications and steps that need to be taken after the purchase of that crypto token. Another example would be, say, an NFT that represents ownership of a car. Well, you still have to register the car with, say, here in Australia, in New South Wales, with New South Wales Registry. So I guess to drive that point home as a business, just be mindful that there are, like on the real world end of the equation here, there are real life implications and consequences which are often overlooked or forgotten. Now, turning to the next slide, we're going to now talk about the inverse of the intermediated token system, which is the public token system. And that's a token system which is described as one which doesn't involve a promise that a middle person, an intermediary or agent, will perform a function. These functions are ensured by a crypto network directly. There are two types of public token systems. We've got network tokens and public smart contracts. The network token is a crypto token that is created as part of the consensus mechanism on public crypto networks, and that are used by the holders of these tokens for various other functions. An example of this could be like a liquidity pool token that is created, or it could be a governance token that's also created as a result of on-chain activity, and it could be for voting purposes. You've also got the smart contracts, the public smart contracts, that is. That are smart contracts. They're created for the purposes of enabling unknown parties to enter transactional relationships as well. So these are created by the coders and developers in the ecosystem at large. Now, the problem with regulating public token systems, which the paper identifies and which we agree with, is that the existing regulatory frameworks don't map out to these public token systems. That's because we're talking about public crypto networks that are creating these network tokens, which are created from a smart contract protocol or smart contracts, and therefore there's no person or no legal person which can be held responsible or is responsible. So, like Joel said, there are rumblings from overseas where, so for example, ETH has been alleged to be a security, but this is obviously problematic from a regulatory point of view. From a consumer perspective, there is a considerable amount of risk when you're interacting as well with these public token systems. So you've got exposure to technology risks. So what if there's a bug in the smart contract code, as well as model risks? So this is when we're talking about unsound economic mechanisms. So if there is a drain, for example, so it's maybe the algorithm hasn't been designed well. You can also look to last year, the Terra Luna fallout. Now, compliance risks is another one. So, for example, if you using a public smart contract and it gets blacklisted, where you have to look at Tornado Cash, for example, which has been sanctioned by a US regulator. And obviously, because of the experimental nature of these systems, there's unknown risks. So this is the big problem area for Parliament and for industry stakeholders to work through as part of this token mapping consultation process and the drafting legislation. And it's not a problem which is confined to Australia either. So last week, the EU Parliament passed the Data Act, which requires smart contracts to be alterable, including and must include safe termination and interruption provisions. So it's an attempt to legislate and regulate public smart contracts, basically. Yeah, so we won't go into that because it's going to open a huge can of worms. But I'll hand it back to Joel to take you through what we consider to be the likely developments to play out after this consultation.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So as you can see, I mean, there are plenty of issues that need to be resolved, and hopefully we get some sort of guidance in the future from policies and legislation. I guess what's most exciting for us is that by even releasing this paper and consultation process, there's a recognition from the government that at least there is a need for further regulation in the crypto ecosystem. Like the rest of the Chapter 7 of the Corporations Act, any laws around the crypto ecosystem were likely going to maintain their two core concepts of technological neutrality, as well as continue to have a functional approach. But on top of that, we also think that it will be quite consumer focused. We do note that ASIC has announced that one of their key enforcements this year will have a very strong focus on investor harms involving crypto assets. So we do think there will be a focus for consumer and investor protection. We do think though, like as Robert mentioned earlier, any further laws in this space will likely be quite faithful to the discourse already set out in the consultation paper. It's likely that we'll see some high-level taxonomy of crypto assets and their functions, probably along the lines set by the consultation paper, but very high level. It is, as we discussed, it's probably impossible to set out an exhaustive list of financial products within the crypto ecosystem just because it's unlimited. Now, more likely than not, we do think that the government's not going to do a huge overhaul of its existing financial system, financial services laws. It's probably going to keep that intact. But what we might be well prepared for would be a regulatory guide from ASIC on how this is, how the crypto ecosystem is going to be better regulated. A bit more guidance on what is and is not a financial product based on its function. So things like that, we'll keep our eyes open for that. Now, leading up to somewhere in the middle of this year, there's talks that there will be a crypto asset licensing and custody consultation paper. If that comes out, we here at LegalVision will be making submission because it is quite a key issue as well. But we definitely invite anyone and everyone to reach out to us. If you have some things to discuss, we'll be more than happy to take your opinions and your thoughts on board. But yeah, that's a good segue, I guess, to pass it back to Bobby, who will talk about some key takeaways.
Thanks, Joel. So what can you do as a business? Well, A couple of things: keep up to date with the token mapping consultation process. So, there'll be conclusion about that. I guess we'll probably announce something as well when we'll definitely be publicising what we find out. The other thing you should do as well is identify and comply with the existing laws which apply to your business. So whether that's AML, CTF, Australian consumer law, going through any IP licensing as well, just to make sure that you still are complying with any existing regulatory frameworks. Also, really important, this one here about talking about your business model with trusted advisors. So this could be accountants, could be an advisory board or lawyers as well, but preferably experienced in crypto and blockchain at the early stage. And I think this is very important because too many businesses end up developing an amazing, business Web3 business model, and come the end before launching, when they speak to a lawyer, realize that they need to have in place an AML CTF program because they are providing designated services, and obviously that's a unseen or unaccounted for cost which you have to go through, and you do have to go through that as as directors, because you owe directors, you have duties to the companies that you operate and run. So I guess by doing that, you end up doing what we call future-proofing your business. If you do engage quite early and proactively, then you can set out to design your business in a way which is prudent and which will also be legally compliant. I guess apart from that is another important thing is don't go making these assessments. So even though there's a token mapping framework which the government has put in writing in the consultation paper, don't go making the assessments yourselves, because there's bodies of case law. I mean, Joel and I, as you can tell, we look to other jurisdictions, and that's what all legal practitioners are doing or should be doing, and that's making these determinations based on everything we have that we can get our hands on in terms of information. So it's not really a straightforward process, as this is 1 + 1 = 2. You have a financial product. Do reach out if you have any questions or if you just want to chat as well. So that concludes the main part of our webinar, and you might find our publication useful, which is just a Web3 and FinReg fact sheet. I'll hand it back to Joel.
Yep. So yeah, we do have another upcoming event which may be of interest to you. It's the Sexual Harassment and Bullying and Your Duties Under Workplace Laws. That's happening this Thursday on the 23rd of March, so feel free to sign up. Now we're going to answer the questions that you have put forward shortly, but we'll give you some time to submit it. In the meantime, we'll just take a minute just to walk you through our membership. Now, the LegalVision membership and the way we work as lawyers is quite different. We pride ourselves as being quite a cost-effective alternative to the expensive hourly rates that you may experience with other firms. So for really an affordable monthly fee, you receive cost certainty and an all-inclusive approach to legal services. Now, this includes unlimited document reviews, unlimited draftings, amendings, reviewing, whether it's business contracts, commercial leases. You also get access to all of us and have unlimited advice consultations. We have over 100 specialist lawyers, all in places like business structuring, employment disputes, financial regulation, like the webinar, and all sorts of other things. So you get access to all of us. You also get unlimited domestic trademark registrations, which is generally quite handy, especially for a lot of our startup clients. Now, LegalVision membership is very much the best way to describe it is like having your own in-house counsel. We'll take care of all your business as usual legal work so that you can focus on the business. And if you do have an in-house counsel, our membership, if we can say so ourselves, is a cost-effective solution for outsourcing some additional legal work. So, but if you're interested to find out more about how a membership can help you, just feel free to request a free consultation when the survey appears at the end of this webinar. So now I guess let's move to some of the questions that has been put forward. So there's one question here which asks, do you think disclosure laws in this space will likely be affected? Look, I think disclosure laws, it's a yes and no, it will be our answer. I think, and this is just our hunch, but existing disclosure laws like those surrounding, the issuing of financial products, for example, or, marketing and advertising, how they have to be, compliant with consumer laws like don't do misleading and deceptive conduct. We think those existing frameworks will likely remain intact. If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of approach. But we do think there is, in fact, a need for some form of additional disclosure laws, especially those like Robert walked you through earlier, those surrounding intermediate crypto assets, for example, wrapped real world assets, and how there's an extra step that consumers need to be aware of. Or perhaps even just around the function of crypto assets generally. Maybe it might be that Parliament takes the view that any function of a crypto asset has to be, described quite well and quite accurately for consumers. It's probable that those things might happen, but remains to be seen, I guess. We don't know. I think the big question mark that both Robert and I have would be probably for public smart contracts. We don't know whether or not Parliament will take an approach like the EU, where it will, just put its hand in there and says you must do something about this, or whether it will just take a bit more of a passive approach and rely on the existing frameworks. That one is a bit of a question mark.
Joel, I've got this one that's come through. Yeah, I've got two questions which have come through, and they're really good questions. I'll take this. So the question is, you're speaking clearly to the fact that crypto tokens are highly novel, nebulous, dynamic, and functionally promiscuous. And as you indicated, new assets and systems continue to emerge. These characteristics seem inherently and profoundly resistant to systematic definition and classification. And notwithstanding Australia's functional approach to definition, there are obvious risks in trying to develop a taxonomy now that will A, be reasonably future-proof, and B, operate effectively in a globalized financial system. That's a really good point, particularly with regard to the global nature and collaborative nature that's required. So the question is, for organizations who may be considering allowing customers to pay for a service with a crypto token or a cryptocurrency, what would be some of the key legal risks at this time? So it depends. So, sorry, very loyally answer there, but crypto token depends if it's a native crypto token as well, what type of crypto token we're dealing with. But you'd be looking at the the rights which are attached to that crypto token. So is it purely just for a transactional purpose? If it is for a transactional purpose, you still have to consider the the financial services regulatory framework, particularly in the context of making non-cash payments. Then the other thing you need to consider as well is like Joel said, if you're talking about cryptocurrencies, we're talking about public crypto tokens. ETH, for example, is currently being contended over in the States as a security. So there is I wouldn't take that to I wouldn't place a great deal of weight, but it is something that you would need to consider, or at least the legal practitioner would need to consider. So it is the primary risk still sits around whether there's a financial product or whether or not your business is carrying on a financial service. And the financial service isn't just limited to just dealing with cryptocurrencies as well. It's what you do with that crypto token or cryptocurrency as well. Obviously, one other key risk that you'll need to go through is the AML CTF ones. Just mindful of coming to the end of time. We've got a minute to go. The second question is, how many countries have adopted cryptocurrency as legal tender? Now, we've got a number of CBDCs which have been rolled out or being looked into around the world. I think, do fact check me, but obviously, China rolled out digital yuan. Japan's now looking into it. I think Nigeria is doing it as well. The UK is on this as well. Australia's got the Reserve Bank's also got a CBDC pilot program that's in place at the moment. So watch this space. Now, I am quickly running out of time. That's all we have today. When the webinar ends, the survey will pop up. Please complete the survey, include your contact details, and receive that complimentary legal consultation and to see how we can help you with your business. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Joel?
Yep, it has indeed. Thanks everyone for joining us.